There have been times where, there's no way we're hiring a white male person.
Just kind of unspoken.
There are times when it's spoken.
The real story is how they got this on tape. That's what's interesting about this. This reporter just calls him up like, hey, let's go get sushi. I'd really like to talk to you about, ask you some questions. Probably she kept it vague. And I'm guessing she must be attractive to get this guy to run his motor mouth like this, or he's just really dumb, or he just likes talking and sounding important. That's probably more likely. Or he's disgruntled about a recent experience he had himself as a white male, which he does address in this video.
As far as Disney's concerned, I'm a white male, and that's not who they're looking to promote at the moment.
She's being very subtle, where she's trying to play stupid and not sound like she's too familiar with what she's saying, just throwing out enough to get him to be like, oh, let me enlighten you.
So do they care about that, or is like the ethnicity actually?
And then he gets enthusiastic, and then his wheels get turning, and you can see it in his eyes. He looks like he's a little tweaked out almost. He's probably taking some Adderall. If how you do what you do, it's not just what you do, it's how you do it in your daily life, how you conduct yourself. Imagine suddenly 1 million people, 10 million people could see not only what you're doing, but how you're doing it. Tomorrow, that happens. Something like this happens. You go viral, something. If that fills you with fear, if the idea of that fills you with fear, make adjustments. You should not fear transparency.
We have a diversity, equity, and inclusion department who's very involved in setting standards to make sure that shows have diversity.
The Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I just can't imagine paying someone a full-time salary just to think only about diversity. What a waste of money. What do they do all day?
Oh, I know you're talking about the head of the diversity.
The African American lady, So is that kind of her deciding?
She oversees a lot of that for sure. But it's pretty broad, I would say. There are other people in HR who are also focused on that.
And I'm not against writers or creatives being able to have this character's Japanese. It's a samurai movie. We're doing Shogun for Hulu. The actor needs to be Japanese. That's not racist, right? But this goes into other territory, especially when you start talking about writers. There's no reason for a writer's skin color or sexuality or gender to come into play.
But a lot of it is, knowing the guild agreements and the union agreements and everything.
Wait a minute, is she hitting on him?
How long have you been on dating out?
Not very long.
Have you been going out?
Not a lot.
Why is she asking me about dating apps? Okay, now we have logical evidence that she's playing that card very effectively. Now we understand why he's Mr. Motormouth and wide-eyed.
Just, not just gender or sexual orientation and ethnicity, but, making sure that they're hiring some writers who may have certain disabilities where they wouldn't have been hired.
Following that logic, you're hiring someone you would not otherwise have hired for the sole purpose because they have a pre-existing condition. That is strange. That is completely different than saying, I hired this person because they're a good writer regardless of the fact that they have a mental disorder of some form. Or they have, maybe they're schizophrenic or something, but they're extremely creative. And so therefore we're still going to bring them in the room even though they might be difficult to work with, like John Nash or something. This is saying well, we wouldn't have otherwise hired them. The qualifying reason for them being hired is their disability. That is logically inexcusable as far as I can see. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's put to use, or
regardless. I think that Disney would do it regardless, but
he covered his tracks there. I think Disney would do it regardless, trying to say, well, they would just do it regardless because they're good people. But
we're going to make more money if we appeal to a wider variety of people, and it's a good thing because we have shareholders too,
Okay, so the logic here is we make more money by appealing to a wider audience. Okay, that logic checks out. Let's take an example like Star Wars, though, where if it feels forced, what occurs? You get backlash. You have people on YouTube reacting to it. You have the audience does not lie. You can't, and this is the fatal flaw. Kitty, don't hit the camera. This is the fatal flaw, is that they are trying to claim the audience is wrong. You can never, it's like saying numbers don't lie. The audience does not lie. The representation of that elusive, intangible thing that cannot be articulated elsewhere, and that's why we have elections. It's the same philosophy. It's that in the end, even if we don't like it, that's assuming that they are fair and free elections, even if we don't like it. In the end, the audience will save us from ourselves.
I think there's certainly a belief that it's just good for society and they can do. But there's also a belief that, like, we're going to make more money if we appeal to a wider variety of people. And it's a good thing. Because we have shareholders too, you know.
So I think they're worried more about the shareholders than appealing to a wider audience, because the audience doesn't know the gender or the race of the writers. The shareholders get the reports. So if you're talking about the writers, that is correlated to the shareholders. Talking about who appears on screen, then you could make a case that you're trying to appeal to an audience, but don't use that logic if you're talking about the writers or anyone that's off camera.
And so diversity helps with that.
Diversity helps with financial incentive.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see how diversity helps with financial incentives.
I think that there are, like, even conservative people who may not want to lean into it can easily make the argument that, like, we make more money when we appeal to a wider variety of people, and that means diversity.
Yeah.
There's a real focus on every show. And I'm sure the movies too, though I don't deal with that side of it. Just making sure that the writer's room has a real, diversity.
Okay, so what's going to happen to this? Let's just think about this logically. What's going to happen? He's going to be thrown under the bus. They're going to say he's an unhinged employee. He's disgruntled, and they're just going to deny the whole thing. I bet you I think Elon already tweeted this. He's going to, this reminds me of the Don Lemon interview when Don Lemon was asking about, well, how are standards being changed and how are hiring practice? Do you have any evidence of that? Well, he's got some evidence now.